Hello, and thanks so much for joining us here on Tips for the Transition, the Career Roadmap, where we help you to see things differently and approach them with curiosity, courage, and confidence. I'm Maria Tomás-Keegan, career and life coach for women leaders, and my specialty is leading them through change and transition. Each week, I invite you to eavesdrop on an inspiring conversation with other experts who share their brilliance and encourage us to think deeply and consider new perspectives on our careers and lives. So, as I often do, I'm going to start off with a question for you today, maybe two. So, have you ever been in conversation with someone but didn't feel heard? Or maybe you felt judged. What about talking with someone and you're kind of missing each other? You're not connecting. When this happens, my next guest says there's something missing. It's not that we're not hearing the words, but we're not listening. Because this is important in every area of our lives, and I talk about this with many of my clients, I am thrilled to welcome Deb Porter to the show. She is the founder of HOLD, and that's an acronym for Hearing Out Life Drama. Deb is an expert in active listening. She believes that listening is not just a soft skill, but an essential one. She spent over 25 years helping people develop it to improve their relationships and communication and leadership. We'll explore how listening to yourself and others can lead to deeper connections, stronger teams, and more fulfilling lives. So stick with us because this conversation might just change how you communicate for good. Welcome, Deb. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much, Maria, for having me. I'm so excited for this conversation. What a beautiful lead in. That was gorgeous. Thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. You're so welcome. All right, so let's just start by, creating some common ground here and a common
Yes.
understanding. So, from your perspective as an expert, what is active listening?
Yeah. I love that you're starting there. Active listening to me is the art of engaging both in content and emotions. It's got to be both. If we only engage with the content and not the emotions, we miss. If we engage with the emotions and not the content, again, we miss. So it has to be both.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that. Engaging with content and emotions. And I think it's the emotions part that gets us in trouble sometimes, isn't it?
It's so interesting. I was doing a presentation with a group and I was asked a question. So I have this person who kept repeating themselves over and over and over, saying the same exact thing. And I just came back to this exact definition. Well, in that scenario, it's highly likely that you were connecting with the content, but not the emotion. And this person was in business and they got a little kerfluffled because they're like, ooh, I don't know how to I don't know how to connect with the emotion, but you got to figure out a way to do both or the connection's not going to happen.
Mm,
Yeah.
okay. All right. So, how do listening to ourselves
Mhm.
and listening to others intersect?
So before we can ever listen to anyone else, we really do have to start with ourselves. Most people think listening starts with the other person. It does not. Listening begins with us. So critical, so important. You have to start with you. And so they intersect then because once you begin with you, then you're able to bring that to the other person and let them coincide and be together. It's you have your truth and the other person has their truth, and both are allowed to be there in the same space, and it creates magic, really.
Okay. So, listening to ourselves, there's a lot of self discovery that has to happen for us to listen to ourselves and be honest with ourselves, right?
Yes.
and come from an authentic place.
Yes.
So we can listen. And I think that's where listening for the emotion might come in. Am I right about that?
Yeah. If you're not listening to yourself and you don't know what your own emotions are, you're not going to be able to really hear another person. So let's say, for example, let's just take an example because it's easier for people, right? So
Yeah.
if let's say, uh, let's say you're my coach and you can you're experiencing a bit of frustration with me because you can see something that I'm not seeing. Um, and I'm not able to hear, but that frustration is keeping you from presenting it then perhaps in a way where I can hear. Right. So, taking that step back and finding a place of calm will then allow you to speak to be heard in a way where the other person can hear. It's so interesting to me that the reverse of what I apply in listening can also be used with speaking, and it's the same format, it's the same structure, and you just apply it in reverse, and it makes conversations incredible. Suddenly now they're flowing and they're working. But the emotional piece is really key. It's essential to know where you're starting from in order to know where you want to go to.
Yeah. So I'm thinking about tough conversations
Mm-hmm.
that feel like this,
Yep.
right? Instead of this, right? Feel like we're butting heads instead of conversation going very naturally back and forth. And there is a mutual respect for what we are saying, even though we may not necessarily agree, right? So I'm trying to figure out what my question is here. But it's the emotional piece of it. This is really where I think a lot of people get stuck,
Yeah.
is allowing other people's feelings and opinions to be spoken, and then hearing them without judgment, and then just having a very natural conversation about it, right?
Yeah, it leads itself into empathy for the other person, right? It's that respect that you
Right.
mentioned and empathy. I think that's really where we want to get to. I was thinking we'd go there later in the conversation, but we're there now, so let's go. I was giving a presentation to another group, and I was asked a specific question by a gentleman. He said, I have a person in my world who is in leadership, and I simply cannot find empathy with him, his behavior. I don't know. I don't know what else to try. What would you say to me? How can you help me? And so what we did is we started to talk about this man, and I tried to really help him see this leader from a different perspective. And so we talked. I talked about how much do you know about him in his role in his life? How many people is he leading? What kind of stress is that bringing to him? Do you think that it's possible he might be actually trying to protect you with some of his behavior? Have you ever considered this? Have you thought about that? And we just moved all the way around and looked at kind of a 360 kind of view, um, to enable him to find some empathy for a person that he didn't think it was possible for. He had all kinds of expletives for this guy, but he couldn't find empathy. And after we talked, he was like, "Oh, I just never thought about it like that."
Right.
And that's really what we have to do if we really want to be able to engage with another person and hear them. We have to try to really understand their perspective, and that means taking a step back, slowing ourselves down, and finding that center, that place of calm. It's often not in the conversation. A lot of times people try and do the work that's really
Right.
important in the conversation. By the time you're already in it, it's probably too late. This is the work that has to happen beforehand. This is why I say listening starts with you. It's that piece that comes before. It's that coming to the understanding ahead of time that you want to come into a conversation and you want to bring your whole self to listen and understand and really embrace the whole person.
Right. So it's being intentional about how you prepare for and allow yourself to be open. And I think you called it empathy. I think sometimes it's maybe also or um, instead just finding common ground, right? Which does not necessarily equate to empathy. It could, but it might not. But having common ground, finding a place from which to start, and then taking it from there.
It was a major shift for me when I began to understand that you could have your truth and I could have mine, and they could both coexist at the same time in the same
Right.
space. And neither one of us was wrong. That was a really profound moment for me. And it took a long time to really embrace that concept, because it wasn't how I was raised. I was raised in a very black and white scenario. I was raised in a place where people tended to fly off the handle instead of, or become silent instead of engaging with each other. Communication is part of why I became a communication expert. It's like, there's got to be a better way to do this. I'm going to find it in my life and I'm going to practice it. And so that's what I've done. But yes, certainly, if there's a conversation that's becoming difficult for you, taking a moment to really know what you're feeling, breathe into it, and allow the other person's really key.
And I think it's okay too to step back and say, I want to pick up this conversation at a later time.
Yes.
I need to regroup. I need to step back and really think about what's going on here and come back to this conversation coming from a different place.
Yeah. So important. I think a lot of times people don't quite know how to set that up and do it. I've had a lot of conversations. It's one of the free resources on my website is actually directed toward that. It's called Rescuing a Sideways Conversations. Like how do you exit the conversation and how do you come back into a conversation?
Right. Yeah.
It's really key to learn. One of the biggest times that I experienced that in my own life was when my son told me he wanted to go into the military. I was like, not happy with that,
Right.
declaration and decision that is what he wanted to do. And I found myself not in a place where I could stay calm. I'm just not at all in an area where I could hold space like I normally do. And so, thankfully he's lived with me and he's seen me practice this for his whole life. And so it was, accepted by him when I said, look, I'm not able to hear you right now. I know I'm not. You matter to me. I really want to know what it is you're saying to me in a deep way, and I simply cannot hear you. So let's come back to this. And it's important. I hear it's important to you, but let's come back when I can be calm. So I stepped away, and this particular incident took me longer. Sometimes I can step away and 5 minutes later I've got it and I'm ready to enter back into the conversation. This one was bigger. It took me some time. I had to really do the work right within myself to be able to come back to that conversation.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that example, because I mean that's a biggie. But you're right. So some of the situations you might encounter where you're missing each other, right? And you know it, and you don't want it to escalate into something where people start to say things they wish they hadn't, right?
Yeah.
So thank you for saying that sometimes it takes, no time at all to get back to the conversation. And other times, like in your situation, you really got to dig deep and it takes a little while and you got to figure out how you really feel about it and how important his feelings are about it to you and to him. Yeah, that's giving yourself the space
The
to
potential
work through that.
Yeah, the potential was there to break the relationship. I mean,
Yes.
I could have done. I could have done.
Yeah. Huge potential for that. And knowing that that's not what you wanted the outcome to be, stepping back and taking the space you needed and the time. Love that.
So wise. Yeah.
So wise. Exactly. So you have a very rich and fascinating story. You told us just a little teeny bit about it. I would love for you to share for our audience um, some of it so that we understand how active listening became your life's work.
Yeah, there was a pivotal moment where I was about 7 years old, and I was in the car with my parents, and their conversation went off the rails, and so I was in the back seat, and the driver of the car began to express themselves through the vehicle, and suddenly we were hurtling down the road at 123 miles an hour. It was quite terrifying, and what I saw from my young vantage point at that moment was that I could see how they were just missing each other. I could understand both points of view, and I wanted so badly in that moment to bring it all together. And so while I wasn't able to do that in that moment, what it did was it propelled a deep desire in me to really know how to communicate well with other people, to know how to embody and live in every moment, um, communicating in a way that would be heard. Um, so that was part of it, and then I thought when I was in my early 20s that I was going to be a full-time pastor in the United Methodist Church. I got my background in training with Master of Divinity degree with a specialization in care and counseling. And then the LGBTQ plus issue blew up in the church. And at the same time that was happening, a family member came out to me. And I just realized that I could not stay committed to the church. If my family member ever came to me and said, "Will you marry me?" my answer would be yes. The same time this was happening, I was seeing colleagues be put on church trial. They were losing their pensions. They were losing not just their pensions, but their credentials. Like they did not have credentials anymore to practice in the church. And so I stepped away. Did not complete the ordination process. I was serving as a licensed local pastor at the time and exited the process. My daughter was young, and so moved on from there. Later, we discovered that my husband had a genetic condition, and that condition was the same one that his two siblings had died of. And so that was a pivotal moment in my life as well, where we weren't really sure what was going to happen next with that. I think that piece formulated a great deal moving forward too, because for about 8 years of our marriage, he was extremely ill. And during that time, family and friends, they would say all kinds of things to me to try to fix things. Mm-hmm. And it is really the number one listening mistake is fixing. We'll just call that out for people right now. If you're a fixer, learn how when somebody goes, and I don't know what to do, learn how to hold space with that and simply say, I hear that there's a lot going on for you right now. And I don't know if you want my advice or if you simply want me to listen. And when you do that, when you simply do that, it allows the other person to have the space to process what they need and move forward. It's so powerful. So yeah. Anyway, a lot of things all played into that to bring me to who I am and what I do today. My work in the funeral home also, I would have stayed there forever, to be honest with you. I love that work. It very much filled the needs of what I needed to do, but the funeral home decided they were changing the compensation plan. And I said to myself, okay, what's next? With all of the things that I've lived in my life, if I can do anything right now, what is it that I want to do? And what came to me as I was folding the laundry one day is, what if I listen? What if I listen? And that just felt so right. And so the business was born.
Mm.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that story. You've been through a lot, and I can see how your skill was honed in those various stages of your life. You started with a story about your son and the military,
Mm-hmm.
your husband going through some difficult health issues, and having to. I'm caregiver for my husband, so I know how important this is to kind
Yeah.
of listen to what's underlying, right? What they're not saying as much as what they are saying.
Yes.
Listening for me is not just listening to words, but reading body language, reading their breathing, right? There are so many other signals to listen to
Yes.
when we're communicating with another human being.
I think it's so important to, when we start talking about listening to what they're not saying, I'm always really clear about that piece when people say that, simply because of this. Sometimes we can make assumptions that
Yeah,
aren't true. And so we always want to make sure that when we get to one of those, that we're leaning in and asking the question to get that clarification, to make sure that what we think in our mind is actually what the other person is experiencing. Because if we don't do that, we can miss.
yeah, yeah. And that can lead us down a rabbit hole of misunderstanding and things escalating from there because we didn't take the time to clarify. This is
Yeah.
what I think I heard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's
And
it.
is that right? And simply, I mean, as coaches, we know that question really, really well, right?
Clarification is so key.
Yeah,
It really is.
yeah, yeah. I love the technique that you shared with us when you were telling your story. Let's dig into that one a little bit more because I think that's something that everyone struggles with when someone's going through something, and many of us are fixers by nature, right? We just want to fix it. I know I'm that way. I just want to fix it. And so many times I just have to surrender to the fact that that's not my job.
And you know what's so interesting? It's that 99% of the people, when you give them the opportunity, to, uh, when you only listen, they walk away feeling better. That
Yeah.
they get exactly what it was that you were wanting to offer. But without actually doing that part, then they don't, because then they don't feel heard, they don't feel seen, they don't feel understood. It's actually in giving that the transformation happens. I don't know if that's your experience, but that's what I've seen
Yeah.
over and over and
Yeah.
over again.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Just giving people space, right? To just to get it off their chest without saying anything, without giving them advice, without just listening, just going, I hear that. I hear that.
Another common mistake people make is, oh man, I remember when that happened to me. And then they go into their story. And then
Yeah.
suddenly now they're all down on their rabbit hole about what they went through. And not that I'm not compassionate, that I don't care about that. But when I'm in the middle of my struggle and the intention for the conversation was, and I thought was, you're going to
To
listen to
make
me
me
for
feel better.
help me for just a minute, right? When I thought that was the key, then uh, then there you go. There's no relief. There's no
Right.
sense.
Right.
There's none.
And you walk away. And if the person who said, I remember when that happened to me, was only listening to themselves,
Right.
right? So that's a technique that I think a lot more people need to learn. I know that this is something I have to practice myself because it's so easy or for me, it's easier to say, let me, what can I do? What can I do? Right? What action can I take to make you feel better?
Sometimes there's none. And
And
then
and
what? It's the listening that's it. That
then
is the action.
that's right. That's
Yeah,
right.
for
Yeah.
sure.
And I
Yeah.
think a lot of people don't even realize that all they need is for someone to listen. So if we offer that to someone who doesn't even realize that's what they need, and they go, "Oh," and then they talk, and then they unload, and then they feel better, and you've given them a gift.
Yeah. Someone
There's so
said to
much.
me, "Oh, sorry. I looked
No,
away. I missed your cue." Sorry.
no, there is so much to this.
Truly. Body
Truly.
language is one, because
Yeah.
when I looked away, I missed that you were still going. I'm sorry about that. So
No, it's
that's one of the
okay.
things I teach. When that happens, that's what you do. When when you miss like that, that's what you do. And there's grace and acceptance in that too. I think that's really, really powerful.
Okay. So let's talk about are there other practical techniques to becoming a better listener that can help us in both our personal and professional lives?
So what I teach is a framework called the CORE, another acronym, and it stands for calm, outcome, relate, and empathy. So we've already talked about the calm a little bit. When you come into a conversation, you need to make sure that you're ready to listen, that you are in that calm state of mind, ready to hear someone. Next, you need to know what is the outcome that they're looking for. What is it that they need from you? Getting clear about that is really easy when it's something like, let's decide where we're going for dinner. Everybody knows, okay, the outcome that we're looking for is what place are we choosing tonight? It's different if, for example, we're sitting in a team meeting and we need to solve a bigger problem. Then getting clear about what that problem that we are intending to solve is really key, because we might be thinking we're solving this problem when in fact two other problems actually surface. And the reality is, if we focus on this other problem that became named because we were listening to each other, now we have some really incredible, powerful solutions in our team. So getting clear on the outcome is really important. Then we want to make sure that we're relating. So there's a lot to unpack with this R part of the relate, but it includes, just in brief, things that you would normally think about when listening, right? Close the door, make sure that your phone is put away, those simple practical things. But it also includes things like learning how to ask the right questions. It includes things like body language, which just body language alone, oh my gosh, you can that is so explosive. There's so many things to catch and to watch. And then finally, the E part is empathy, which we've touched on already. So I'm bringing that empathy to and compassion to every conversation. If you practice that core in your life, in your business, in your professional life, you'll discover that your connections will be deeper and life will be so much better.
Mm, I'm feeling calmer already.
I have that effect on people.
Yeah, that's such a great way to kind of create the framework around which you can have conversations where you listen and are heard, all in the same all in the same conversation. That you're listening so others are heard and they feel heard, and that you are contributing to the conversation and are heard as well. What a beautiful thing that is.
Right? Yes,
What a
indeed.
beautiful thing that is. Yeah.
It'll change the world. If we all start to practice this, it has the potential to literally change the world. I talk about the power of listening. That is my tagline for the business. The power of listening. It's powerful. It's
Mhm.
powerful. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. But in so many cases, I mean, I think about this season that we are in right now that is, the election season,
Hmm.
and how everyone is talking over each other and no one is listening.
Yeah.
No one is being heard. And nothing good is coming out of it, except, for me, heightened anxiety, confusion, just so you're right. I think it could change the world, and my job, your job, everyone's job is to just change our world, right? One person at a time in our world, and then let that ripple effect take place.
100%. Yes.
Yeah. So, are there some simple habits that our listeners could start to kind of cultivate um, deeper connection with themselves and then ripple effect those around them?
Hmm. One of the things I really recommend is that you get in touch with your feelings. So I like to tie the practice in with something that I'm doing multiple times a day anyway. So whether it's when you're brushing your teeth, or whether you're maybe you have a daily walk, or maybe you're just eating, when you just think about it when you're eating. So every time I get my food, I'm sitting down. I'm like, what am I feeling right now? What have I been feeling through the day? When we know how we're feeling, it helps us then to check that and to be able to move into conversations with others from a calmer state, because we're not bringing the pile up of the day with us, right? So that's one really important thing that I think is to do, is to check in and to know how we feel. I don't know about you, but I wasn't really taught to know how I felt. Like, my feelings weren't encouraged as a child, and uh, learning to name them, beginning to understand um, what they meant, and how to express them to other people. Learning to do that is just so incredibly powerful. Yeah. So
Okay. That's a hard thing for a lot of people,
yeah, we weren't
checking in
taught.
with their feelings. Yeah.
We weren't
Yeah.
taught.
So, you know, we're such a touchy feely society today in comparison to when I was raised. And you're younger than I am. So if it happened to you too, then there's this generational thing that's going on, and feelings are um, kind of the last thing we talk about as, a family. If I grew up with three older brothers, and they teased me incessantly, and my feelings got hurt a lot, and I would cry, and I was the crybaby. Don't be a crybaby. My feelings were not acknowledged. The fact that it hurt me, that didn't matter to it seemed, except my mother was always there for me, but we were the only two girls in the house. So we had to,
Mm.
right? But yeah, so we're not taught to sit with and acknowledge how we're feeling and decide what to do about it from there.
And I think when we bring that into the business world with us, that's so amazing, because it's that ability then to know, okay, well, this was unexpected, and how do I really feel about that? And to be able to name, ooh, um, this actually really makes me angry. So I am angry, but now how do I say that in a way where the other person can hear me? Right? That's a whole piece that's really, when you learn how to do that, it's really powerful.
So this is all so inextricably tied to not only learning how to be a great listener, but learning how to communicate in ways that you are heard, the person that, so that it doesn't become contentious, right? And so you get your point across,
Yes.
right? So the art of the communication, of course, the art of persuasion, there's so many things that come in to play here.
I think that's what I like so much about it is it's complex. It's complex, and yet everyone can learn it. You know, it's people think, oh, this is, not sure I want to think about emotional intelligence, or I'm not sure I want to think about, improving my communication. I know how to listen. And in fact, if we think about, there's a Scientific American study that offered questions to men and women, and the questions were meant to be easy to hear and to remember. 66% of women got it right, and only 49% of men. And it was supposed to, it should have been much, much higher because the questions were written to be simple and easy. I think that it's indicative, and not to get into gender as much here because it's shifting, and I'm so happy about that. I've seen so many men, especially in the last 2 to 3 years, there's a shift occurring in our culture, and I'm so excited about it. Right? It's not just women who need these skills. We all need these skills. These are essential skills.
Right.
So
Right.
you said at the top of the show, that is one of the things I believe in. It was very interesting to me. I got really curious about, okay, so soft skill, where did that come from? And I Googled it. I'm like, all right, where does this originally
Yeah.
come from? And what I learned was that soft skills was a term developed by the Army, by the military.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. I didn't either until I Googled it, and then it made a little bit more sense why I didn't want my son going that direction.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't even call it soft skills anymore. I think I don't call them hard skills either. I call them technical skills and human skills.
Human skills. I like human. I like essential. Maybe even
Yeah.
a little bit better. It's because it's human and it's essential for all of us. Maybe it's
Right.
both words.
Because
Yeah.
this is what we're made of, right? These are natural. They're part of who we are at the soul level, right? At the cellular level even, right? So to ignore our feelings, to ignore our emotions, to not consider them or someone else's. But so when we show empathy to ourselves, when we treat ourselves like we would treat when we treat ourselves like we would treat our best friend, we begin to come from a place of empathy, of grace. And then if we can listen coming from that place, we're off to a good start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Truly. It was fascinating to me when I learned that only 2% of people in our nation have had any training in active listening. That's according to listen.org. That's kind of mind blowing. Like only 2%. We have to teach this. We have to teach this to our kids. We have to live it in our lives. We have to live it in our businesses. We have to live it everywhere. And we have to help people know this is how we do this. And because truly, as you pointed out earlier, the political climate, we're not seeing people listen to each other. And so if we have this on our TV and this kind of and we're normalizing that it's okay to interrupt another person, that it's okay to speak over another person. If we're going to normalize that, uh, what you're saying doesn't matter to me,
Right.
th- we're missing in the most fundamental and important ways.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you're so right about teaching children how to listen and not and modeling it so that they grow up understanding the power of listening that's tied to communicating and all of the other things that go along with that. I think you're right. It's like we don't teach financial health to young people either. Communication and listening skills we should start honing those at a very young age. in our educational environments, I believe.
I think it's immediately after birth. I think it starts from the very moment there
Yeah.
that another person arrives on the planet. I think it starts there, but it continues. It should continue all the way through to the end of life. Actually, my background and training taught me that our sense of hearing is the last thing to go when we die. So we're able to listen all the way to the very end of our experience. And so, how powerful is that?
Yeah, even when we may not be able to speak,
Mm-hmm.
there are there are people who believe, and I do too, like just what you just said, that they can hear us.
Yes.
Yeah, so speak to them. Yes. Okay, so let's talk about curiosity. It's one of my favorite words.
Ah. Mm.
What role does curiosity play in being an active listener?
when when you're really listening to somebody, you want to be curious about the the next thing that maybe they're not saying. And so there's really so much power in the power of the question, right? So I don't know how many of your listeners might be in sales or that type of thing, but certainly the power of the question. It doesn't matter if we're talking sales or if we're talking relationships. It's that power of the next question, right? So and how we frame it, whether we're asking it in an open-ended way or if that's the preferred way. Because if we're asking a closed-ended question, for example, if we're going to talk about kids, how was your day at school? Fine, right? You're going to get that one word answer. Whereas if you ask a more open-ended question, um, who did you talk to on the playground today, right? That's a whole different conversation that then can open up that curiosity. If we're talking in our work world, if we say to our client, what is it that you really hope to do in the next year with your business? Then we're inviting them into a whole new experience with you and also with themselves, which is just delightful. It's expanding. That's the word. It helps us to expand. Curiosity helps us all to expand.
That's so true. I love that you said that. You're so right about that. Um, it brings in all kinds of different perspectives that
Yeah.
you may not have considered when you get curious about um, what was just said, or like you just said, what hasn't been said, or what's the next thing that's likely to come, and what kind of question can you ask to bring it out.
Yeah.
It makes the conversation richer. It brings more possibilities. It exposes more possibilities.
Mm.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite. It's one of my favorite questions. It's one of my favorite things. That word, curiosity, it plays in so many different areas of our lives.
It does. When I was in ninth grade, I had a teacher. Her name was Miss Lampman, and she said to me, "Deb, you're so curious." And it took me back. I was like, "Oh, well."
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
And from her, it was the first time, and the reason it stuck with me so strongly is that from her, she was letting me know this was a good thing. In other scenarios in my life, I had heard it as a bad thing because I had a lot of questions as a kid.
Yeah,
I had a lot of questions,
I bet. Yeah,
many, many questions. And it's when those are open and received, right? When that is encouraged and allowed and embraced, it
yeah,
allows people to flourish, right?
that's right. That's
It
right.
really does.
And when you said earlier, that active listening can change the world. Having conversations that are based in curiosity just adds such richness to the world. So there's so many ways that we can change our little world and let that just create more ripples.
I love the ripples. I'm all about the ripples.
I am all about the ripples too.
Yes, indeed.
So let's talk about leadership in business. whether it's in corporate or in your own business, how can active listening foster really meaningful, deep team dynamics?
I think that it helps teams really understand that you know and care about them. And that's important from a human perspective. So, the number one desire of employees is good communication. This was a study that was done. The number one thing. And so, when we come at our life and our work from a perspective of, I'm going to listen to you, I want to know what you think, I care about your perspective, the impact is pretty profound. Yeah.
Yeah, it can be. And if we model it,
Yeah.
As the leader, then everyone plays in this playground, in this sandbox with us.
Yeah. It was striking to me when I was working at the funeral home. There was a woman who was working in the cremation society, and she had about 2 or 3 things that she saw that could be done differently and better that would actually save the company money. And one day we were talking, and she was telling me about this, and I said, "Have you brought this to the owners?" And she said, "Nah, they won't listen. They won't listen." And it was one of those moments that really took me back, because if you were the owner of a business, why wouldn't you want to know from your employee these things that could make it better? Why would you not want to? Are you so resistant to change? Right? That tells me that those owners weren't really ready to step into. Now I'm sitting here. Oh no, my LinkedIn profile probably has the company I work. Okay, anyway, yeah. So, sticking with the importance of the listening in the business, it can make a financial impact. $62.4 billion are lost a year in businesses. Did you know that? Because of ineffective
Wow.
listening. 62.4 billion with a B. That's mind blowing. And it's exactly because of small things like this one instance where this person who can see the solution, she has it, she knows it, she's ready to implement it, but she's stuck
Yeah,
because
because
it's not going to be,
they won't
because
okay it.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
They won't
Yeah.
listen.
I wonder
Yeah.
how they measured that.
I don't know. I think it was a Gallup though. So it's a
Wow.
source I trust. Gallup or Gitnux. I can't remember which one that
Yeah.
one came from, but it
Yeah.
was one of those two. Hmm.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we can impact not only lots of lives, but our livelihood, right?
Truly. Yes.
If we can just model some of these techniques that Deb has shared with us so graciously today. Yeah, I love this conversation. I love all of the threads that are in this conversation. We are talking about active listening, but we are talking about way more than that too, right? It's the whole. The the two sides of listening, communicating, listening, communicating, being heard, right? Having empathy, having curiosity. There's just so many threads woven in here that I love that. I love that. It feels like a tapestry, a really rich tapestry. Yeah. I'm glad you do what you do. I am really happy that you came here and spoke to us about it, because I am certain that there are lots of people who are listening or will listen on demand in all the places that we are, who are going to get some little nugget out of this, and it's going to change the way they communicate. It's going to change the way they listen. It's going to change one little habit that's going to make a big difference. That's why I do these. I love this.
Yeah. Yeah. Imagine if the owners of the funeral home had gotten curious and they sat down and they said, "Oh,
Yeah.
what's one thing that you could do to to improve our business. And then they just stopped and listened.
Yeah. Yeah.
Then what happens? And then what happens? And then what's next? And then what's the next question? And then how does that grow? And how does
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
it's one thing to say, oh, I have an open door policy, but if the door is going to be open, but they're going to hit a wall once they walk through that door because they aren't heard, it does no good.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Deb, I could talk to you for a long time about this. There's so many facets that we could dive into, and we're kind of running out of time here.
Fair enough.
I would love for you to wrap this up for us. What are like the key takeaways that we should walk away with today?
So I gave you the core: calm, outcome, relate, and empathy. Put it on a note card. Keep it somewhere where you can see it. If you want to know more, well, let me know. Engage with me more. I think that a key takeaway is knowing that active listening affects businesses in profound ways, financially, emotionally, and the number one thing that employees want is good communication. I think knowing that is really, really key. So, yeah, I think all those are really powerful points that hopefully people come away with.
Thank you so much for sharing your brilliance here with us today. I really appreciate you and all you do. And I know that there are people who are going to want to connect with you. So give us the one best way for them to do that.
HearingoutLifeDrama.com is the website, and you're welcome to, there's a contact me there too. So yeah, I'm always ready to listen.
She walks the talk, people. She does indeed. Deb, thank you so much for being here. I've really enjoyed this conversation with you.
I did too. Thank you, Maria.
You're welcome. And for those of you who are watching and listening, thank you so much for being a part of this community. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, comment, and share your favorite episode so we can, like we've said multiple times in this conversation, let's create more ripples in the world by sharing this conversation with others. Because creating and sharing resources for women is just one of my favorite things to do. And we do that with every episode that we create here. Another favorite thing is being a career and life coach for women leaders, navigating challenging times and helping them get unstuck, explore new possibilities, and find harmony in their careers and lives. So if something in this episode resonates with you and you'd like a new perspective, a fresh idea, reach out and let's talk. The links to connect are in the show notes below. And then let's meet again next week for another inspiring conversation. Because you know what? I believe it's our time to thrive. So let's thrive together. Till next time, I'm Maria Tomás-Keegan, helping you turn transition into triumph.